The morning of the 28th of September, 1863, found Pavel Ivanovich bent over his workbench, examining the silver backing of a damaged Rococo mirror through his jeweler's loop. Outside his workshop on Vasilevsky Island, the autumn rain tapped against the windows with the persistence of a debt collector. He had risen before dawn, as was his custom these 42 years of life, though only the last 17 had been spent as a free man with his own establishment. The mirror beneath his hands told a story of neglect, tarnished silver, lifting at the edges where moisture had crept in like doubt into a marriage. Some merchant's wife had sent it, claiming it had been her grandmother's. Pavel knew better. The frame was perhaps 20 years old, French-made, but assembled locally, probably sold as an antique even then. He never confronted such deceptions directly. Let people keep their family mythologies. "Master Pavel," young Fyodor called from the grinding wheel, "should I continue with the beveling on the Morozov order?" The boy, 17, eager, with fingers that shook slightly when he thought no one was watching, had been with him 6 months now. There was something furtive about Fyodor lately, a quality Pavel recognized but couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was merely the nervousness all apprentices developed when they began to understand how much they didn't know. Pavel straightened, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back. "After you've swept the silver filings from yesterday, every grain, Fyodor. Silver doesn't grow on birch trees." The boy nodded quickly, too quickly, and Pavel made a mental note to check the sweepings bin later. Trust, he had learned, was like good glass, transparent but fragile. The workshop occupied the ground floor of a narrow building that leaned slightly toward the canal, as if trying to catch its own reflection. Above, 2 families of clerks lived in cramped quarters, their footsteps marking the hours like a wooden clock. Pavel had chosen this location deliberately, close enough to the wealthy districts to be accessible, far enough to keep the rent manageable. The post-emancipation years had taught him that freedom without financial prudence was just another form of bondage. He returned to the Rococo mirror, applying amalgam with the patience his father had beaten into him during those long years in Count Sheremetev's estate workshops. His father had died still a serf, never seeing the Emancipation Proclamation of 1861. Sometimes Pavel wondered if the old man would have known what to do with freedom anyway. Some chains, once worn long enough, became part of the skeleton. The doorbell chimed, its bronze voice cutting through the workshop's familiar symphony of grinding, polishing, and the whisper of cloth on glass. Pavel looked up to see a footman in dark green livery, rain dripping from his coat like tears from a mossy saint. The man's bearing spoke of old nobility, the kind that still expected the world to arrange itself according to their convenience. "Pavel Ivanovich Krupin?" The footman's tones suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "My master, Baron Volkonsky, requires your expertise at the Sosnovy Bor estate. The matter is urgent." Pavel knew the name. Who in Petersburg didn't? The Volkonsky family traced their lineage back to Rurik himself, or so they claimed. Their estate, 30 versts from the city, was said to be a monument to old Russian grandeur mixed with European sophistication. "What is the nature of the work?" Pavel asked, wiping his hands on his leather apron. The wealthy often confused their urgency with actual emergencies. "A mirror," the footman replied, producing a sealed letter. "The Baroness is distressed by it. His Excellency wishes the matter resolved quickly and discreetly." Pavel broke the seal, noting the quality of the paper, thick, cream-colored, watermarked. The Baron's handwriting was precise, controlled, but there was something urgent in the slant of the letters. The compensation offered was generous, suspiciously so. In Pavel's experience, the nobility paid well only when they were either desperate or hiding something. "Tell His Excellency I will come tomorrow morning," Pavel said. The footman looked as if he might protest, then thought better of it. After he left, trailing rainwater and disdain, Pavel stood holding the letter, feeling the weight of it beyond its physical presence. "Master, you're going to work for the Baron?" Fyodor had crept closer, his eyes bright with curiosity. "They say his new wife is half his age, beautiful as a spring morning." "They say many things," Pavel replied, folding the letter carefully. "Most of them nonsense." "Mind your beveling, and remember, gossip is like inferior glass. It distorts everything it passes through." But as he returned to his work, Pavel's mind wandered to the Volkonsky estate. A distressing mirror, an upset young wife, a baron willing to pay handsomely for discretion. His father had always warned him that the nobility's problems had a way of becoming everyone else's catastrophes. Yet the workshop needed the money. The new German competition was fierce, their modern techniques and equipment drawing away customers who once would have waited months for Pavel's craftsmanship. The rain intensified, and somewhere above, one of the clerk's children began practicing violin, badly. Pavel smiled despite himself. This was his world now, imperfect, struggling, but his own. Tomorrow, he would enter that other world, where mirrors could apparently cause distress sufficient to summon a craftsman from the city. He thought of his father again, remembering the old man's words. "The rich see themselves in mirrors, Pasha. The poor see only glass that needs cleaning." Perhaps tomorrow he would discover which reflection the Baroness Volkonskaya was seeing. The carriage wheels found every rut in the road to Sosnovy Bor, as if the earth itself was testing Pavel's resolve. The 29th of September had dawned clear but cold, autumn asserting its dominion over the Petersburg countryside, with frost that turned meadows into silver mirrors. Pavel sat rigid on the worn velvet seat of the hired conveyance, his tool case beside him like a faithful dog. The coachman, a talkative Georgian who claimed to know every estate within 50 versts, had finally exhausted his supply of gossip about the Volkonsky family. Through the window, Pavel watched the landscape transform from urban sprawl to rural melancholy. Peasant huts crouched beside the road like old women at prayer, their thatched roofs dark with moisture. 2 years after emancipation, and still they looked the same. Perhaps freedom, like good wine, needed time to show its effects. Or perhaps, Pavel thought with the cynicism his father had considered his worst trait, freedom was just another word the powerful used to rearrange their obligations. The estate announced itself first, through an avenue of birches, their white trunks lined up like an honor guard stripped of leaves. Then came the gates, wrought iron worked into the Volkonsky arms, a wolf rampant beneath 3 stars. The house itself sprawled beyond, yellow stucco with white columns, a testament to the previous century's faith in architectural symmetry. Pavel counted 32 windows on the facade alone. Each one, he knew from experience, would have its own particular problems. A footman met him at the entrance, not yesterday's rain-soaked messenger, but an older man whose face had been carved by decades of professional discretion. "Pavel Ivanovich, Her Excellency awaits you in the blue drawing room." The man's eyes assessed Pavel's modest coat and well-worn boots. filing him in some mental catalog between merchant and artisan. The blue drawing room proved to be neither particularly blue nor conducive to drawing. Pale silk wallpaper depicted Chinese scenes in washed-out indigo, and the furniture stood arranged for display rather than comfort. Baroness Elizaveta Petrovna Volkonskaya sat near the window, backlit in a way that made her seem translucent. 23 years old, Pavel judged, with that particular beauty that suggested French governesses and Italian dancing masters. Her hands twisted a handkerchief into increasingly smaller knots. "You are the mirror master?" Her voice carried a slight tremor, like a glass about to shatter. "My husband says you are the best in Petersburg." Pavel bowed correctly, not too deep, which would seem servile, nor too shallow, which might offend. "I repair mirrors, Your Excellency, sometimes successfully." She almost smiled at that, then caught herself. "It's upstairs, in my chambers, the mirror. It shows things incorrectly." She stood abruptly, her movements bird-like, nervous. "I know how that sounds. My husband thinks I'm being hysterical." "Mirrors can develop many problems," Pavel said carefully. "Warping, tarnishing, separation of the silvering. What appears supernatural often has a mundane explanation." She led him through corridors heavy with portraits of deceased Volkonskys, their painted eyes following the intrusion of the present into their preserved past. The master bedroom door stood open, revealing a space that seemed to exhale old perfume and older secrets. And there, between two windows, hung the mirror. Pavel's breath caught. Even from the doorway he could see this was no ordinary piece. The frame was Venetian, definitely, carved giltwood depicting Neptune's court in minute detail. The glass itself seemed to hold light differently, as if it were still learning how to reflect this northern world after centuries in Mediterranean sun. Such mirrors cost more than his workshop earned in 5 years. "Watch," the Baroness said, positioning herself perhaps 4 feet from the glass. "Do you see?" At first, Pavel saw only what he expected, a young woman in a morning dress of pearl gray silk. Then she moved slightly closer, and something shifted. Her reflection seemed to elongate, the face narrowing, the eyes sinking deeper into their sockets. Another step, and the distortion increased. Her reflected mouth pulled down at the corners, the cheekbones sharpened into something skeletal. "Mother of God," Pavel whispered before he could stop himself. "It shows me as a corpse," the Baroness said, her voice flat with repetition of this horror. "Or a demon. My husband's mother, the late Baroness, the servants say she had this mirror specially made. They say she cursed it before she died, that she swore no other woman would be happy in this room." Pavel approached the mirror slowly, his trained eye already cataloging possibilities. The glass was old, certainly, perhaps early 18th century. The silvering showed no obvious damage, no spots or lifting. He ran his fingers along the surface, feeling for irregularities. "May I ask, Your Excellency, when did you first notice these distortions?" 3 months ago. We had been married just over a year. I was happy then, or thought I was. Then one morning I stood here, exactly here, brushing my hair, and saw that thing looking back at me." Her voice dropped. "Now I can't unsee it. Even when the reflection is normal, I know that creature is waiting." From the doorway came a slight sound. Pavel turned to see a woman in housekeeper's black, her face as expressionless as winter stone. 58 years old, he guessed, with the particular dignity of upper servants who had outlasted several generations of masters. "Marfa Stepanovna," the Baroness said, and Pavel heard something, fear, resentment in her tone. "The housekeeper. She served my husband's mother for 20 years. "Your Excellency," Marfa said with a curtsy that managed to suggest disapproval, "the Baron has returned. He wishes to speak with the craftsman." The Baroness's hands resumed their handkerchief torture. "Of course. Pavel Ivanovich, please, you must find what's wrong with it. I can't. I can't continue living with that thing watching me." As Pavel followed Marfa through the corridors, he noticed how she walked, purposeful, proprietary, as if the house belonged more to her than to its titled occupants. "You've served the family long?" he ventured. 35 years, she replied without turning. "I've seen all the baronesses who've looked in that mirror." Something in her tone made Pavel's craftsman's instincts sharpen like his best cutting tool. "All of them? How many would that be?" She stopped, turned, and for a moment her controlled face showed something raw and complicated. "Enough to know that mirrors only show what's already there, Master Krupin. The question is whether people are prepared to see it." Baron Nikolai Alexandrovich Volkonsky stood in his study like a man posing for his own portrait, straight-backed, hands clasped behind him, gazing out at his estate's autumn gardens. At 55, he carried his years with the particular gravity of those who had never questioned their place in the world's hierarchy. When he turned to acknowledge Pavel, his eyes held the weary skepticism of someone forced to indulge an unreasonable request. "My wife tells me you've seen her demon," he said without preamble. "Though I suspect what you've actually seen is the effect of old glass and an overwrought imagination." Pavel chose his words like a man selecting tools for delicate work. "I've observed unusual optical properties in the mirror, Your Excellency. The cause requires further investigation." "Investigation," the Baron tasted the word. "How modern." "Very well, investigate. But understand this, I won't have my household disrupted by superstitious nonsense. My late mother was given to such fancies in her final years. I won't watch my current wife travel the same path." The morning of the 30th of September found Pavel alone with the mirror, his tools arranged on a cloth with surgical precision. He had requested privacy for his examination, claiming the need for absolute concentration. In truth, he wanted to observe without the weight of watching eyes. The bedroom held its breath around him, dust motes suspended in shafts of light like tiny planets unsure of their orbits. He began with the basics: measuring tape, level, calipers. The mirror stood 70 inches tall, 42 wide. The frame added another 8 inches to each dimension. He recorded everything in his notebook with the methodical care his father had beaten into him. Measured twice, cut once. Measure again to be certain, the old man used to say, usually while boxing Pavel's ears for some perceived carelessness. Next came the surface examination. Pavel used a straight edge, checking for warping. This was where the mystery began to reveal itself. The glass wasn't uniformly flat. In certain areas, he marked them with chalk on the frame, there were subtle depressions, concavities so slight that they would be invisible to casual observation. But from specific angles at particular distances, these imperfections would compound, creating exactly the kind of distortion the Baroness had demonstrated. The work was masterful in its malevolence. This wasn't damage or age. This was deliberate craftsmanship, the work of someone who understood both optics and cruelty. Pavel felt a reluctant admiration for the skill involved, followed immediately by revulsion at its application. A knock interrupted his measurements. "Come," he called, expecting a servant. Instead, Viktor Semyonovich entered, a man Pavel hadn't seen in 15 years, not since they'd both worked at the Sheremetev estate. Viktor had grown thick around the middle, his face weathered into permanent good humor. He wore coachman's livery now, the Volkonsky wolf embroidered on his chest. "Pasha, by all the saints, it is you!" Viktor's embrace was enthusiastic and smelled of pipe tobacco and horse leather. "When they said a mirror master from Petersburg was here, I never imagined. But look at you. Your own business, working for barons?" "Viktor," Pavel returned the embrace, genuinely pleased despite his surprise. "You're here, at Sosnovy Bor? 8 years now." "Head coachman for the last 3. It's a good position, especially now that we're, well, you know." He meant free, but even 2 years after emancipation, the word still felt dangerous to say aloud in the noble's house. They talked quietly while Pavel continued his examination, Viktor filling in the estate's recent history with the easy gossip of someone who spent his days driving and listening. "The first baron's wife, that was before my time. She went mad, they say. Used to see devils everywhere, especially in mirrors. Ended her days in a private asylum near Moscow. Then came Anna Mikhailovna, may she rest in peace. Iron woman, that one. Ruled this house like Catherine the Great, only less forgiving." Pavel paused in his measuring. "And the current baroness?" Viktor's expression grew complicated. "Sweet girl. Perhaps too sweet for this house. She tries to be kind to the servants, but Marfa Stepanovna..." He shook his head. "That one served Anna Mikhailovna like a devoted dog. Doesn't take well to new mistresses, especially young pretty ones who don't know that kindness here is often mistaken for weakness." Before Pavel could probe further, another interruption. A young maid with worried eyes. "Master Krupin, you have a visitor from Petersburg. Says it's urgent about your workshop." Pavel's heart contracted. He found Fyodor in the estate's entrance hall, the boy's face flushed from hard riding. "Master, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Dmitri found silver filings in my personal box. I was going to..." The boy's confession tumbled out like water from a broken dam. He'd been taking small amounts of silver from the sweepings, planning to sell them to a jeweler he knew. His mother was ill, medicines were expensive, he'd meant to pay it back. Pavel listened to the confession with a familiar sinking feeling. Trust broken was like a cracked mirror. Even repaired, the damage always showed. He should dismiss the boy immediately, perhaps even involve the police. That's what his father would have done, what any sensible master would do. But looking at Fyodor's terrified face, Pavel saw himself at 17, desperate, foolish, convinced that one small sin could solve vast problems. "Return to Petersburg," he said quietly. "Continue your work. We'll discuss this when I return. And Fyodor, if even one more grain of silver goes missing, I'll hand you to the authorities myself. Understood?" The boy's relief was painful to witness. After he left, Pavel stood in the entrance hall, aware that his mercy might be mistaken for weakness, like the young baroness's kindness. Perhaps that was the curse of this house. It forced everyone to choose between hardness and vulnerability, with no safe ground between. Returning to the mirror, Pavel completed his measurements with grim satisfaction. The concavities followed a pattern, a spiral that drew the viewer's eye inward while distorting the reflection outward. At normal viewing distance, the effect would be negligible. But at exactly the distance where a woman would stand to arrange her hair or apply cosmetics, approximately 4 feet, the distortions would combine into something monstrous. He thought of the skill required to create such an abomination. The Venetian glassmaker who had crafted this had understood both the science of optics and the psychology of torment. This wasn't just a mirror, it was a weapon designed to destroy slowly, invisibly, deniably. The estate's library occupied the entire West Wing's second floor, a cavern of leather-bound ambitions and dust-covered pretensions. On the 1st of October, Pavel found himself among its towering shelves while rain hammered the windows with increasing fury. The Baron had granted him access to the household records, grudgingly, with the clear expectation that this exercise would prove the mirror's innocence and his wife's hysteria. Pavel pulled ledger after ledger from their resting places, each one exhaling the breath of decades. The Volkonsky family documented everything with the obsessive detail of those who believed their smallest purchases might interest future historians. Receipts for Parisian gloves, bills from Petersburg tailors, invoices for cases of Bordeaux wine, the detritus of privilege accumulated across pages like sediment. The mirror's trail appeared in the accounts for 1841. Pavel's finger stopped at the entry, "To Giovanni Benedetto, master glassmaker of Venice, for one looking glass of particular specification, 800 silver rubles paid in full." 800 rubles, enough to buy a small estate or feed a village for a year. But it was the phrase, "particular specification," that made Pavel's pulse quicken. He searched for correspondence from the same period. The late Anna Mikhailovna had been a prodigious letter writer, her hand cramped but precise. Most concerned themselves with social trivialities. But finally, tucked between an invitation to a name-day celebration and a complaint about linen quality, Pavel found it. The letter was in French, addressed to Mon cher Giovanni. Anna Mikhailovna thanked him for accepting her unusual commission and praised his discretion. "The specifications we discussed in Venice," she wrote, "must be followed exactly. The effect should be subtle enough to escape casual detection, but pronounced enough to achieve the desired psychological impact. I trust your expertise in these delicate matters." Pavel sat back, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. This was proof of deliberate malice, crafted with the same care one might commission a portrait or a piece of jewelry. But why? The first Baroness had still been alive in 1841, though the servants' gossip suggested she was already showing signs of the madness that would eventually consume her. A discreet cough made Pavel look up. Marfa Stepanovna stood in the doorway, a tea service on a silver tray. "I thought you might require refreshment," she said, though her eyes were on the letters spread across the desk. "Most thoughtful," Pavel replied, casually covering the French letter with a ledger. She set down the tray with practiced efficiency, but her gaze lingered on the documents. "You served the late Baroness during this period, didn't you?" "I had that honor." Her tone suggested the question was impertinent. Pavel poured tea, noting how she watched him, not with a servant's deference, but with something sharper, more calculating. "She must have been remarkable to inspire such loyalty, even after death." "She understood what this family required," Marfa said. "Some women are born to be baronesses. Others—" She let the sentence die, but its ghost lingered in the room. That evening, Pavel joined the family for dinner, an affair of crystal and contradictions. The Baroness barely touched her food, pushing pieces of roasted goose around her plate like chess pieces in a losing game. The Baron consumed his meal with mechanical efficiency, occasionally glancing at his wife with a mixture of concern and irritation. Between them, conversation lay murdered by silence. "Your investigation proceeds?" the Baron finally asked. "I'm examining all possibilities, Your Excellency, including the possibility that the mirror is simply old and my wife is simply imaginative." The Baroness's fork clattered against her plate. "Nikolai, please. What would you have me believe, Liza? That my mother's ghost haunts a piece of glass? That she reached from beyond the grave to torment you specifically?" His frustration had the quality of an oft-repeated argument. Pavel observed the interplay, noting how Marfa, supervising the footman, seemed to derive satisfaction from the tension. When the Baroness excused herself before dessert, claiming a headache, the housekeeper's expression flickered with something that might have been triumph. Later, alone in his guest room, Pavel studied his notes by candlelight. The pieces were arranging themselves into a pattern, but gaps remained. He needed to understand the first Baroness's fate, the one who had seen devils in mirrors. The 2nd of October dawned gray and hostile, but Pavel ventured to the servants' quarters, where memory lived longer than in the main house. He found his answer in the estate's laundress, a crone named Agafia, who had served the family for 50 years. She remembered the first Baroness well, Maria Sergeyevna, a beauty from Moscow, who had brought a substantial dowry and progressive ideas. She wanted to educate the serf children, Agafia recalled, her fingers working mechanically at her sewing. Talked about liberty and dignity. Anna Mikhailovna despised her for it. The first wife's madness had begun slowly. First, she complained of nightmares. Then she started avoiding mirrors, claiming they showed her things that weren't there. By the end, she was found trying to smash every reflective surface in the house, screaming about demons wearing her face. The Baron, father to the current one, had her committed for her own safety. She died in the asylum 2 years later, having never recovered her reason. And Anna Mikhailovna, Pavel prompted, became the new Baroness within 6 months. Oh, she waited the proper mourning period, but we all knew she'd been waiting much longer than that. Agafia's expression suggested volumes left unspoken. On the 3rd of October, Pavel's childhood friend Victor sought him out in the stables, away from listening ears. "There's something you should know," Victor said, checking that they were alone. "Young Dunya, she works in the kitchen. She's been walking out with me these past months. Sweet girl, observant too. She says Marfa goes into the Baroness's room at night when the family's asleep, adjusts things, furniture, curtains, even the angle of the mirror itself." Pavel felt the final pieces clicking into place. How often? Every few nights, always when the moon is dark, so she needs no candle that might be noticed. Victor's face showed his conflict between loyalty to a friend and fear of the housekeeper's power. "Dunya's terrified Marfa will find out she told me. That woman has ways of making life miserable for those who cross her." Pavel gripped his friend's shoulder. "Tell Dunya to say nothing more." "And Victor, thank you." The 4th of October brought an unseasonable warmth that made the estate feel drowsy and unstable, as if summer were attempting one last deception before surrendering to autumn's authority. Pavel spent the morning interviewing the older servants, those whose memories stretched back to Anna Mikhailovna's reign. Each conversation added another thread to the tapestry of malice he was uncovering. The head gardener, a Lithuanian named Kazis, who spoke Russian with a musical accent, remembered Anna Mikhailovna's particular interest in optical instruments. She had a telescope brought from England, he recalled, trimming dead roses with methodical precision. Spent hours studying the stars, she said. Though we all knew she used it to watch the servants' quarters, nothing escaped her attention. The old cook, Praskovia, was more direct in her assessment. She was a calculating woman, God rest her soul. Came from merchant stock, you know, for all her heirs. Her father made his fortune selling grain during the 25 famine. She understood profit and loss better than any nobleman, and she applied those principles to everything, including marriage. Pavel recorded these observations in his notebook, using the cipher his father had taught him, a simple substitution code that would appear as meaningless scratches to casual observers. Paranoid, perhaps, but in this house, paranoia felt like prudence. That afternoon, a letter arrived from Petersburg that complicated his situation further. Dmitri, his senior apprentice, wrote that Fyodor had confessed everything to the other workers and thrown himself on their mercy. More surprisingly, the boy had sold his deceased father's watch, his only valuable possession, and placed the money in the workshop's strongbox as partial restitution. "The boy seems genuinely repentant," Dmitri wrote. "But your decision will set a precedent for how we handle such matters in the future." Pavel set the letter aside, troubled by this parallel betrayal to the one he was investigating. Both Fyodor and Marfa had violated trust, but where did correction end and cruelty begin? His father would have had Fyodor arrested without hesitation, but his father had died believing that mercy was weakness, and what had that hardness earned him except a grave marked only with a wooden cross? The 5th of October dawned with frost, and Pavel made a decision. He would map the exact positions from which the mirror created its worst distortions. Using string and small weights, he created a grid on the bedroom floor, marking each point where the reflection shifted from truth to torment. The work was tedious, requiring him to view the mirror from hundreds of slightly different positions. But slowly a pattern emerged. The distortions weren't random. They occurred at exactly the places where a woman would naturally stand while performing her morning toilette: before the washstand, at the dressing table, beside the bed while putting on shoes. Someone had calculated these positions with mathematical precision, understanding not just optics, but the intimate routines of feminine life. Victor appeared in the doorway, ostensibly delivering firewood, but actually bringing intelligence. "Dunya says Marfa was in here again last night. Moved the dressing table about 3 inches toward the window. Such a small thing you'd never notice, but it would change the angle of reflection," Pavel finished. "The woman isn't just maintaining the torture, she's fine-tuning it." That evening, Pavel watched Marfa during dinner service. She moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, but her eyes constantly tracked to the Baroness, who had managed to eat perhaps 3 bites of soup before pushing her bowl away. When the young woman excused herself early, a habit that was becoming routine, Marfa's lips twitched in what might have been satisfaction. Later, in the servants' hall, Pavel shared tea with Victor and carefully guided the conversation toward the estate's history. Other servants drifted into the discussion, the way Russians always did when the past was being excavated. Each had a piece of the story, like fragments of a shattered mirror that, when assembled, revealed an ugly truth. Anna Mikhailovna had been in love with the Baron, the current one's father, since she was 17. But he had married Maria Sergeyevna for her connections and dowry. Anna had waited, cultivating her merchant father's wealth and her own reputation for piety and good sense. When the chance came to join the household as a companion to the increasingly troubled Maria, she took it. She was always there, recalled Ivan, an ancient footman whose tenure stretched back 40 years. Comforting the Baron when his wife had her episodes, managing the household when the mistress couldn't, being everything a baroness should be except in name. The 6th of October brought rain that turned the estate grounds into a brown soup. Pavel worked in the library, searching for any documentation about the mirror's installation. He found what he was looking for in a household inventory from November 1841, just 2 months after the mirror's arrival. The entry noted that the looking glass in the Baroness's chamber had been repositioned according to the mistress's specifications, and that particular attention should be paid to maintaining its exact placement. The mistress at that time would have been Maria Sergeyevna, already beginning her descent into madness. But who had written these specifications? The handwriting wasn't the Baron's, nor did it match other documents from the estate manager. Pavel held the paper to the light, studying the formation of each letter. And then he knew. He'd seen this hand before, in the letter to Giovanni Benedetto. Anna Mikhailovna had written instructions for tormenting her rival in the household inventory, hiding them in plain sight among lists of silver spoons and linen counts. The audacity of it took his breath away. She had documented her crime, confident that no one would ever think to look, or if they did, would understand what they were seeing. Pavel thought of the young Baroness Elizaveta, isolated in her room, afraid of her own reflection. History was repeating itself, but with a crucial difference. Anna Mikhailovna had orchestrated the first tragedy from within, as a member of the household. Now Marfa carried on her mistress's work from beyond the grave, loyalty transformed into something monstrous. The rain intensified, and somewhere in the house, Pavel heard the sound of glass breaking. A window, perhaps, or maybe something more deliberate. He remembered his father's words about the nobility's problems becoming everyone else's catastrophes. But this wasn't about nobility anymore. This was about the terrible mathematics of revenge, calculated across decades and refined to an art. Pavel's letter to Venice had been carefully composed on the 7th of October, written in the formal Italian he'd learned from an old master who'd trained in Murano decades ago. He addressed it to the Guild of Mirror Makers, invoking professional courtesy and hinting at a matter that touched upon the honor of their craft. Such letters usually took weeks to receive answers, but Pavel had learned that craftsmen's guilds possessed their own networks, faster than official post when professional reputation was at stake. The response arrived on the 9th of October with surprising speed. Carried by a private courier who had the look of someone accustomed to discretion. The letter bore the seal of the Venetian Guild, and its contents made Pavel's hands tremble slightly as he read in the privacy of his guest room. "Esteemed colleague," it began in Italian, "your inquiry touches upon a delicate matter from our archives. Giovanni Benedetto, deceased these 15 years, was indeed a master of our guild, though his later works brought more shame than honor to our brotherhood. The letter went on to describe how Benedetto had developed a specialty in what were discreetly termed mirrors of particular purpose, looking glasses designed to create specific optical effects for clients with unusual requirements. The Guild's records showed 3 commissions for what Benedetto had privately called jealousy mirrors, instruments of psychological warfare disguised as decorative objects. The first had been ordered by a Neapolitan countess who suspected her husband of infidelity. The second went to a Spanish merchant who wanted to drive his brother mad to claim an inheritance. The third, Pavel's breath caught, had been commissioned by a Russian noblewoman, Anna Mikhailovna Volkonskaya, who had visited Venice in 1840, accompanied only by a trusted servant. Benedetto's technique, the letter continued, involved creating controlled concavities in specific patterns, invisible to casual observation, but devastating in their cumulative effect. He claimed he could calibrate the distortions to produce specific psychological responses: fear, revulsion, even suicidal ideation. The Guild censured him privately, but could not prove criminal intent. He died of a fever before formal proceedings could begin. Pavel set down the letter and walked to his window, watching the estate grounds where gardeners were burning autumn leaves. The smoke rose in lazy spirals, and he thought about how evil could be crafted with the same precision as beauty, using identical tools and knowledge. The only difference lay in the craftsman's intent. Victor found him there an hour later, bringing news that added another dimension to the puzzle. "You'll never guess what Dunya overheard," his friend said, checking the hallway before closing the door. "Marfa was in the old Baroness's room. They've kept it just as she left it, like a shrine. Dunya was cleaning the adjacent chamber and heard Marfa talking. To no one, Pavel, talking to the empty room, as if Anna Mikhailovna were still there." "What did she say?" "Something about keeping her promise, about protecting the family from another unworthy woman. Dunya says it gave her chills, like listening to someone pray to a devil instead of a saint." Pavel considered this information. He'd seen such devotion before, servants who identified so completely with their masters that they lost themselves entirely. But this went beyond loyalty into something pathological. Marfa wasn't just following old instructions. She was communing with her dead mistress, seeking approval from beyond the grave. That evening, an unexpected development changed Pavel's approach entirely. The Baroness Elisaveta, pale but determined, sought him out in the library where he was reviewing his notes. She entered quietly, closing the door behind her with deliberate care. "I know you've discovered something," she said without preamble. "Your face at dinner. You're not a man who hides his thoughts well, Pavel Ivanovitch. Tell me the truth. Am I going mad like the first Baroness?" Pavel studied her face, seeing not the nervous girl of his first encounter, but a woman fighting for her sanity with quiet desperation. "No, Your Excellency. You're not mad. The mirror is designed to create exactly the distortions you see. It was commissioned specifically for that purpose." Her legs seemed to weaken, and she sank into a chair. "Designed? But who?" Then understanding dawned in her eyes. "Anna Mikhailovna." "Yes, but there's more." Pavel chose his words carefully. "The effects you experience aren't random. Someone has been adjusting the room's arrangement to maximize the mirror's impact. Small changes, furniture moved inches, angles altered slightly. You wouldn't notice the changes, only their cumulative effect. Marfa. The name came out as a whisper, then stronger. Marfa, of course. She despises me, though I've never understood why. I've tried to be kind, to respect her position, but she looks at me as if I were a thief who had stolen something precious. In her mind you have, Pavel said gently. You've taken Anna Mikhailovna's place.
For someone who defined themselves entirely through service to their mistress, that must feel like sacrilege. The Baroness absorbed this, her fingers twisting her wedding ring. My husband won't believe it. He considers Marfa part of the estate's foundation, as essential as the walls themselves. And without proof... Proof can be arranged, Pavel said, surprising himself with his decisiveness. But it will require courage from you, Your Excellency. You'll need to play a part, to pretend you've noticed nothing, while we set a trap. For the first time since he'd arrived, the Baroness smiled, not the wan, social smile she wore at dinner, but something genuine and slightly dangerous. Pavel Ivanovich, I've been playing a part since I arrived here. The only difference is that now I'll have a purpose beyond mere survival. They spent the next hour planning, Pavel sketching out positions and angles, while the Baroness provided details about Marfa's routines. Outside, wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the house, old wood settled with sounds like footsteps. Pavel thought about his apprentice, Fyodor, about second chances and the weight of mercy. Perhaps justice didn't always require destruction. Sometimes it just required revelation. As the Baroness prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Pavel Ivanovich, why are you helping me? This goes beyond your commission. Pavel considered his answer. My father died a serf, Your Excellency. He believed the world was divided into masters and servants, with no space between. But I've learned there's another division, between those who create and those who destroy. That mirror is a masterpiece of destruction. Perhaps it's time for some creative correction. The 10th of October arrived, wrapped in fog so thick that the estate seemed to float in a sea of gray wool. Pavel positioned himself in the servants' corridor adjacent to the master bedroom at midnight, Victor beside him in the darkness. They had been waiting for 2 hours, their breathing carefully controlled, their bodies still as funeral statues. Even the house seemed to hold its breath, its usual creaks and settling sounds muted by anticipation. The Baroness had played her part perfectly at dinner, appearing more distressed than ever, barely speaking, retiring early with complaints of nightmares. The Baron had responded with his usual mixture of frustration and concern, while Marfa had watched with an expression that Pavel could only describe as hungry. She had the look of someone watching a play approach its climax. A floorboard whispered in the hallway. Pavel touched Victor's arm, the signal they'd arranged. Through a crack in the door, carefully prepared that afternoon by loosening the hinges just enough, they could see Marfa approaching. She moved with the confidence of someone who had made this journey dozens of times, her black dress rendering her almost invisible, except for the pale oval of her face and the white of her hands. She entered the bedroom without hesitation. The Baroness lay in bed, apparently deep in laudanum-induced sleep, though Pavel knew she had drunk only colored water with a drop of valerian for scent. Marfa stood for a moment, observing, then began her work with the efficiency of long practice. First, she adjusted the angle of the dressing table, perhaps 2 inches toward the window. Then the chair rotated slightly. Finally, she approached the mirror itself. From her pocket, she produced something Pavel hadn't expected, a small notebook, its pages yellowed with age. By the moonlight filtering through the curtains, she consulted it, then made minute adjustments to the mirror's position, loosening and tightening the wall brackets with a tool she'd brought. "Perfect, my lady," she whispered to the empty air, "just as you taught me. She'll see herself as she truly is, an interloper, a merchant's granddaughter playing at nobility. She doesn't deserve him, doesn't deserve this house. You should see her, mistress, growing paler by the day, jumping at shadows. Soon she'll break, just like the other one." Pavel felt Victor tense beside him. They had expected to catch Marfa adjusting furniture, but this confession to the dead was beyond what they'd imagined. The housekeeper continued her one-sided conversation, reporting to her deceased mistress like a soldier to a general, describing the Baroness's deterioration with clinical satisfaction. Then Marfa did something that made Pavel's blood chill. She moved to the exact spot where the distortions were strongest and stood there, staring at her own reflection. In the moonlight, her face transformed into something grotesque, but instead of recoiling, she smiled. "I see you, mistress," she whispered. "I see you watching through my eyes." The Baroness chose that moment to wake, a carefully rehearsed gasp that nonetheless sounded genuine. "Who's there? Marfa? What are you doing?" The housekeeper spun around, her composure shattered. For a moment, she stood frozen, caught between her 2 realities, the devoted servant and the midnight tormentor. Then her face hardened into something Pavel had seen before in cornered animals. "Your Excellency should be sleeping," Marfa said, her voice steady despite her circumstances. "The laudanum, I didn't take it." The Baroness sat up, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I haven't taken it for 3 nights. I wanted to see who was visiting my room, rearranging my world while I slept." Pavel and Victor entered then, Victor lighting a lamp he'd brought. The sudden illumination revealed the scene in all its sordid detail, the adjusted furniture, the notebook in Marfa's hand, the tool she'd used on the mirror's brackets. But most damning was the expression on the housekeeper's face, not guilt or shame, but rage at being interrupted in what she clearly considered holy work. "You brought outsiders into this?" Marfa turned on the Baroness, her servant's deference completely abandoned. "You don't understand anything. This house, this family, it belongs to her, to Anna Mikhailovna. You're just another pretty face trying to steal what was never yours." The Baroness stood, and Pavel was surprised by her composure. "What was never mine? My husband? My home? My sanity, which you've been trying to steal inch by inch, night by night?" "Your sanity?" Marfa laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "You think this is about you? This is about justice. Anna Mikhailovna waited 20 years for her happiness, 20 years of watching that weak-minded fool Maria Sergeyevna play at being Baroness. And when Anna finally had her place, she had only 10 years before God took her. 10 years. While you waltz in at 21, knowing nothing, deserving nothing." The door opened, and Baron Volkonsky entered, his face a study in disbelief. He had been waiting in his study, skeptical but agreeing to Pavel's plan. Now, seeing his trusted housekeeper exposed, something fundamental shifted in his expression. "Marfa Stepanovna," he said quietly, and somehow his calm was more terrible than shouting would have been. "That notebook, is it my mother's?" The housekeeper clutched it to her chest. "She trusted me with her secrets, Your Excellency. She knew that someone would need to protect the family from— She gestured dismissively at the Baroness, "from those who would weaken it." The Baron held out his hand. After a long moment, Marfa surrendered the notebook. He opened it, reading by lamplight, his face growing progressively paler. "These are instructions," he said slowly. "Detailed instructions on how to use the mirror to— Mother of God." Pavel stepped forward. "Your Excellency, the mirror was commissioned by your mother, specifically as a tool of psychological torture. She used it on your father's first wife, and now Marfa has been using it on your current wife, following these written instructions." The Baron looked between the notebook, his wife, and his housekeeper, the full weight of 20 years of deception crushing down on him. The first Baroness, Maria Sergeyevna. She wasn't mad. "The mirror drove her mad, Your Excellency," Pavel said gently, "as it was designed to do." Marfa drew herself up, unrepentant even in defeat. She was weak, unworthy. Anna Mikhailovna was the true Baroness, in spirit if not in law, first. Everything I did for the honor of this house. The complexity of the moment hung in the air. Loyalty perverted into cruelty, love twisted into possession, service transformed into tyranny. Pavel thought of his own apprentice Fyodor, of mistakes and redemption, of the thin lines between dedication and obsession. The study had never felt smaller than it did on the morning of the 13th of October. With Baron Volkonsky behind his desk, Pavel standing by the window, and Marfa Stepanovna seated rigidly in a chair that seemed to diminish her. The autumn sun struggled through clouds, casting unstable shadows that shifted like allegiances in the room. The Baron had spent 3 days reading his mother's notebook, and each page had aged him. Now he looked at Marfa with an expression that mixed betrayal, pity, and exhaustion. 35 years, he said quietly. You've served this family for 35 years, and I trusted you completely. My service was always faithful, Your Excellency. Marfa's voice held no apology, only a terrible certainty. Everything I did was for the honor of the Volkonsky name. Honor! The Baron's laugh was bitter as winter wind. You call driving women mad honorable. You call perpetuating my mother's jealous cruelties honorable? Pavel watched the exchange, noting how Marfa's hands remained perfectly still in her lap, the controlled stillness of someone who had learned to hide their emotions in plain sight. He'd seen such control before, in servants who had survived decades by becoming mirrors themselves, reflecting only what their masters wanted to see. Your mother understood what this family required, Marfa said. Strength, tradition, not the weakness that comes from marrying beneath one's station. The Baron's face flushed. My wife comes from an ancient family, an impoverished ancient family, Your Excellency. They sold her to you for your wealth, just as Maria Sergeyevna was sold to your father. But Anna Mikhailovna, she chose your father, loved him truly, elevated this house through her devotion. Pavel cleared his throat. If I may, Your Excellency, there's something else you should know. He produced the letter from Venice, explaining about the 3 jealousy mirrors and their intended purposes. Your mother didn't just torment Maria Sergeyevna. She studied the practice, perfected it. This was deliberate, calculated malice, disguised as divine justice. The Baron read the letter slowly, his hands beginning to tremble.
When he finished, he set it down with excessive care, as if it might explode. "And you knew all of this?" he asked Marfa. "You knew what the mirror was designed to do?" For the first time, Marfa's composure cracked slightly. "She showed me everything. The angles, the distances, the way light would bend a beautiful face into something monstrous. She said it was a masterpiece, that the Venetian was a genius who understood that beauty and ugliness were just matters of perspective." "And you've been adjusting these perspectives for my wife. Someone had to protect you, Your Excellency." "You're too kind, too trusting. You don't see how these young women manipulate." "Enough!" The Baron's voice cut through her justification like a blade through silk. "I've heard enough! Pavel Ivanovich, could you wait outside for a moment?" Pavel bowed and left, but through the door he could hear the Baron's voice, low and steady, pronouncing judgment. Marfa would be dismissed immediately, though with a pension, the Baron's sense of obligation wouldn't allow him to cast out someone who had served so long, even in such twisted fashion. She would leave for Moscow within the week, forbidden from returning or contacting any member of the household. When Pavel was recalled, Marfa was being escorted out by 2 footmen, her face a mask of dignified fury. She paused at the door, turning back to the Baron. "Your mother loved this house more than life itself. Everything she did was from love. Someday you'll understand that love and cruelty can wear the same face." After she left, the Baron slumped in his chair, suddenly looking far older than his 55 years. "My mother," he said quietly. "I knew she could be harsh, even cruel, but this deliberate evil. How does one reconcile that with the woman who sang me lullabies, who nursed me through scarlet fever?" Pavel thought of his own father, of harsh lessons and rare kindnesses. "People contain multitudes, Your Excellency. Your mother's love for you was probably genuine. Her hatred for those she saw as rivals was equally genuine. The human heart has room for both salvation and damnation." "And Marfa?" "Marfa lost herself in someone else's passion. It happens more often than we'd like to think. People who live their entire lives as extensions of others, never developing their own moral compass. When the other person is gone, they're left following a ghost's commands." The Baron stood, moving to the window to gaze out at his estate. "The mirror, it needs to be destroyed. Actually, Your Excellency, I believe it can be repaired. The glass itself is magnificent. With careful work, I can correct the deliberate distortions, make it true again. It would be a shame to destroy such craftsmanship because it was misused." The Baron turned, surprised. "You would do this?" "It's what I do, Your Excellency. I fix broken mirrors, though usually the damage is more straightforward." Pavel permitted himself a small smile. "Besides, your wife deserves to see herself as she truly is, not through the lens of another woman's jealousy." That afternoon, Pavel found himself in the servants' hall where news of Marfa's dismissal had spread like fire through straw. The reactions were complex, relief mixed with uncertainty, joy tempered by fear of change. Victor sat with him, sharing a bottle of surprisingly good wine he'd discovered in the cellar. "She terrified half the staff," Victor admitted. "But she also ran this house like a Swiss clock. There'll be chaos for months while they sort out a replacement." Young Dunya, Victor's sweetheart, joined them hesitantly. "Is it true what they're saying? That she was making the Baroness mad on purpose?" Pavel nodded. "Sometimes loyalty becomes a kind of madness itself. She couldn't distinguish between serving the family and controlling it."
Like my father, Victor said unexpectedly. He served Count Sheremetev for 40 years, died thinking the Count's achievements were somehow his own. Never had a thought that wasn't about the family's glory. When emancipation came, he didn't know what to do with freedom. Died within 6 months of getting it. They sat in contemplative silence. 3 people caught between the old world and the new, trying to navigate freedoms their parents couldn't have imagined. Pavel thought about Fyodor, waiting anxiously in Petersburg for judgment. The boy had stolen, yes, but he'd also shown remorse, made restitution. Perhaps mercy wasn't weakness after all. Perhaps it was the only thing that distinguished the new world from the old. The 14th of October dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made the world seem newly minted. Pavel stood before the Venetian mirror with his tools arranged like a surgeon's instruments, ready to begin the delicate work of transformation. The Baroness watched from the doorway, still hesitant to come too close, as if the mirror might reach out and grab her. The process will take several days, Pavel explained, running his hands along the glass surface with professional appreciation. I'll need to heat specific sections carefully, apply pressure to reverse the concavities, then re-silver where necessary. It's like convincing the glass to forget the shape it's held for 22 years. Can glass forget? The Baroness asked, moving a few steps closer. Pavel smiled at the question. Glass has memory, Your Excellency. It wants to return to its original form. We just need to remind it what that was. The work was painstaking. Using specialized tools he'd brought from Petersburg, some inherited from his father, others of his own design, Pavel began the restoration. He heated small sections with a controlled flame, never allowing the temperature to rise too quickly, which would crack the glass. Then, using padded clamps and careful pressure, he gradually coaxed each deliberate distortion back toward truth. While he worked, the Baroness grew braver, eventually sitting nearby with her embroidery, though her eyes rarely left the mirror's transformation. It's strange, she said on the 3rd day, watching you undo another craftsman's work. It seems almost sacrilegious. The original craftsmanship was excellent, Pavel admitted, adjusting his clamps a fraction of a millimeter. Giovanni Benedetto was a master, but he prostituted his skill for malice. That's the true sacrilege, using knowledge to destroy rather than create. They worked in companionable silence for a while, then the Baroness spoke again. My husband is different since Marfa left. Quieter. He's been reading his mother's letters, all of them. I think he's trying to understand how he missed so much. Pavel had noticed the change too. The Baron moved through his house like a man relearning his native language, questioning things he'd taken for granted. Yesterday, Pavel had found him in the portrait gallery, staring at his mother's painting with an expression of profound bewilderment. On the 16th of October, Victor brought unexpected news. Marfa's gone to Moscow as ordered, but she left something behind. Dunya found it while cleaning her room. He produced a small leather journal, different from Anna Mikhailovna's instruction manual. This one was entirely in Marfa's hand. Pavel and the Baroness read it together, finding not the ravings of a madwoman, but the methodical records of a devoted servant. Marfa had documented everything, every adjustment to the mirror's angle, every piece of furniture moved, the Baroness's every reaction. But between these clinical observations were passages of startling emotion. Today marks 20 years since my mistress first explained the mirror's purpose, one entry read. She held my hands and told me I was the only one she could trust with such a secret. I felt chosen, elevated beyond my station by her confidence. Is this what love feels like? this terrible burden of someone else's trust. Another passage, dated just weeks ago. The young Baroness smiled at me today, genuinely, asking about my health. I wanted to warn her, to tell her to run, but my mistress's voice is stronger than my conscience. I am what she made me. Is that triumph or tragedy? The Baroness set down the journal, tears on her cheeks. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Knowledge and action don't always align, Pavel said gently. Sometimes people become so invested in a path that changing direction feels like death itself. By the 18th of October, the mirror's restoration was nearly complete. Pavel had corrected all the deliberate distortions, applied new silvering where needed, and polished the surface until it reflected truth rather than manipulation. The Baroness stood before it for the first time in months without fear, seeing herself as she actually was, a young woman who had survived an attempt on her sanity. "I look tired," she observed with wry humor, but remarkably sane considering. That evening brought an unexpected visitor, Fyodor, Pavel's apprentice, who had traveled from Petersburg without permission. The boy stood in the estate's entrance hall, twisting his cap in his hands, his face a study in desperate hope. "Master, forgive me for coming, but I couldn't wait. I've sold everything I own, my tools, my clothes, except what I'm wearing, even my boots for cheaper ones. It's all here." He thrust a leather pouch at Pavel. "Every kopeck I stole, plus interest, and I've been working extra hours taking any job I can find. Please, master, I know I betrayed you, but the workshop is my life. Without it, I'm nothing." Pavel weighed the pouch in his hand, feeling the boy's future balanced against his past. He thought of Marfa, unable to escape the patterns of her servitude. He thought of the mirror, restored to honesty after decades of deception. Perhaps redemption wasn't just possible, perhaps it was necessary. "You'll work without wages for 6 months, Pavel said sternly. "You'll take the worst jobs, clean everyone else's tools, and never complain. Any sign of dishonesty, even the smallest deception, and you're finished forever. Understood?" Fyodor's relief was almost painful to witness. "Yes, master. Thank you. I swear on my mother's soul I'll never—" "Don't swear. Just prove it through action." On the 19th of October, Victor approached Pavel with barely contained excitement. "I've done it, Pasha. I've asked Dunya to marry me, and she's accepted. With Marfa gone, there's no one to forbid servant marriages. The Baron's given his blessing, even offered to increase my wages." Pavel embraced his friend warmly. "When? Spring, when the world is new again." Victor's happiness was infectious. "You'll stand witness for me? I'd be honored." The 20th of October was Pavel's last full day at the estate. The mirror hung perfectly restored. The Baroness had regained her confidence, and the household was slowly adjusting to life without Marfa's oppressive presence. Pavel found the Baron in his study, finalizing payment for the work. "You've done more than fix a mirror," the Baron said, counting out rubles with mechanical precision. "You've exposed a cancer that was eating at my family's heart. I'm grateful, though gratitude feels insufficient." "Your Excellency, may I speak freely?" The Baron nodded. "Your mother wasn't evil, just damaged by years of wanting what she couldn't have. Marfa wasn't evil either, just lost in someone else's obsession. Evil is often just pain that's been allowed to ferment too long. The mirror, It was just glass shaped by harmful intent. Now it's just glass again, ready for better purposes. The Baron considered this. You're philosophical for a craftsman. Mirrors make philosophers of us all, Your Excellency. We can't help but reflect on what we see. The 1st of November arrived dressed in frost and wood smoke, All Saints' Day bringing its peculiar mixture of remembrance and resolution. Pavel returned to the Volkonsky estate not as a summoned craftsman, but as an invited guest, his hired carriage now carrying gifts rather than tools. The same avenue of birches greeted him, but they seemed less like sentinels now, more like old friends marking familiar territory. The transformation of the household was evident from the moment he entered. The footman who greeted him smiled genuinely. The hallways seemed brighter despite the autumn gloom, and somewhere in the distance he heard laughter, actual laughter, not the performed tinkling of social obligation. The house was learning to breathe again. He found the Baroness in the morning room, her complexion rosy with health and something more. She rose to greet him with both hands extended, a gesture that would have been unthinkable at their first meeting. Pavel Ivanovitch, how wonderful to see you. You must hear all our news. The news, as it turned out, was considerable. The Baroness was with child, due in the spring. The Baron had hired a new housekeeper from Moscow, a competent widow with no connection to the family's past. Most surprisingly, they had received a letter from Marfa, now working in a Moscow orphanage, asking forgiveness for her actions. I wrote back, the Baroness said, surprising Pavel. Not to forgive, I'm not ready for that, but to acknowledge her letter. Perhaps someday. She trailed off, her hand moving unconsciously to her still flat stomach. Motherhood makes one think about cycles, about how pain passes from generation to generation, unless someone chooses to break the pattern. Pavel was given a tour of the changes. The mirror remained in the master bedroom, now reflecting truth rather than torment. The Baroness stood before it without hesitation, adjusting a pin in her hair with casual confidence. Sometimes I forget it was ever anything but honest, she admitted. The mind has its own ways of healing. In the servants' hall, Pavel found Victor and Dunya preparing for their spring wedding, with the elaborate planning of those who had never expected to have anything worth celebrating. Dunya showed him the lace she was making for her veil, each thread a small rebellion against the servitude that had defined her mother's and grandmother's lives. It's strange, Victor mused, how quickly things can change. 6 weeks ago, we were all terrified of our own shadows, of Marfa, of the way things had always been. Now look at us, making plans, imagining futures that belong to us. Pavel thought about his workshop in Petersburg, where Fyodor was currently sweeping floors and cleaning tools with the devotion of the genuinely repentant. The boy had kept his word, arriving before dawn and leaving after dark, never complaining about the menial tasks or the loss of wages. The other apprentices had begun to respect him again, seeing in his humility something more valuable than his previous cockiness. That evening, Pavel dined with the family, a smaller, more intimate affair than the formal dinners of his previous stay. The Baron had aged, but seemed somehow younger, as if throwing off the weight of unexamined tradition had given him new energy. He spoke of plans to modernize the estate, to pay his workers better wages, to build a school for the village children. My mother would be horrified, he said with dark humor. She believed in the divine order of things, in everyone knowing their place. But that mirror taught me something. When you distort reality to suit your wishes, you create monstrosities. Better to see clearly and adjust your wishes to match what's true. After dinner, Pavel walked the grounds alone, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. He found himself at the estate's old chapel, its doors standing open despite the chill. Inside, candles flickered before icons, and he realized this was All Saints' Day, when Russians remembered their dead with both sorrow and gratitude. He lit a candle for his father, that hard man who had taught him his craft with blows as often as words. Another for Anna Mikhailovna, whose twisted love had created such elaborate suffering. One for Maria Sergeyevna, the first mad baroness, who had deserved truth rather than torment. Even one for Giovanni Benedetto, the Venetian master whose skill had been perverted to cruel purposes. Standing there in the candlelight, Pavel thought about mirrors and what they showed. Every reflection was both true and false. True to the moment, but false to the whole, showing surface but not substance, present but not past. People, he realized, were like mirrors too, reflecting their experiences, their fears, their loves, sometimes distorting them into something monstrous, sometimes clarifying them into unexpected beauty. He thought of Marfa in her Moscow orphanage, perhaps finding in those parentless children a healthier outlet for her devotion. Of Fyodor, learning through hardship what privilege had failed to teach. Of the Baron and Baroness, building something new on the ruins of old deceptions. Of himself, a serf's son who now dined with nobility, who fixed what was broken and sometimes, perhaps, helped break what needed fixing. The chapel bell tolled the late hour, and Pavel made his way back to the house. Tomorrow, he would return to Petersburg, to his workshop that leaned toward the canal, to his apprentices and his craft, and his small place in the changing world. But tonight, he was content to be here, in this space between past and future, between servitude and freedom, between distortion and clarity. In his guest room, the same one he'd occupied during the investigation, Pavel prepared for sleep. Through the window, he could see the first snow of winter beginning to fall, each flake a tiny mirror catching the moonlight. Somewhere in the house, he heard music, the Baroness playing piano, a piece he didn't recognize, something modern and hopeful. He thought one more time of the Venetian mirror hanging in the master bedroom, finally telling the truth after decades of lies. Glass, he had told the Baroness, had memory. It wanted to return to its original form. Perhaps people were the same, beneath all the distortions, the pressures, the deliberate warping. There was an original truth waiting to be restored. Pavel smiled at the thought, philosopher-craftsman to the end. Tomorrow he would return to his tools and his trade, to the honest work of helping people see themselves clearly. But he would carry with him the memory of this house, this mirror, these people who had found their way from distortion to truth. It was enough. More than enough. It was, in its own quiet way, a kind of miracle. As sleep took him, Pavel heard the snow intensifying against the windows, covering the estate in white, making everything new. In the morning, the world would be transformed, unrecognizable, but somehow more itself than ever. Just like a properly restored mirror. Just like a story reaching its proper end.